One of the keys in life is learning how to handle disruption. One of my favorite people is Clayton Christensen. He's a professor up at Harvard Business School, and he talks about disruption, how to adapt to that, how to create it, and what to do. Today, you got a treat on your hands. Disruptive technology is our next topic, and the person presenting this is a person I've got a chance to know today. We happened to be in the van on the way over and got a chance to talk. He is a fascinating man, just returned from Kazakhstan, and he's got a mind that is like a steel trap, the kind of ideas that he has. And so this person is going to show us what's going on, some ideas for the future, what's happening in disruption, nano satellites. He's going to be talking about medical. He's going to be talking about a host of different things. This is one definitely. Get your pen and paper ready to go. Get your note-taking device ready to go as you get a chance to listen to Filipowski, a marvelous human being that I'm honored to know myself. Flip, glad to have you with us today.
Thank you. I start out by usually pinpointing the fact that in life there's some realities that have to be addressed. And we have on our hands a technology and set of technologies that could very well change the profile of what many people in this planet are confronting. I reflect back on one sentence that I heard from Hawking's. It really made more sense to me than anything I had ever read before. And that is that the future of humanity is at risk, most likely because there will be an uneven absorption of technology. And that is the single biggest threat to humanity. And you can imagine what that means in so many different ways. It means that you get mad because you don't have the same opportunities, strife, all kinds of behavioral issues that come into play that could be avoided if we find a solution to absorb this technology across the board. This is a picture of New York City, Fifth Avenue in the year 1900. I realize that you're not all going to run up here and try to spot where the car is, but I can tell you there is one car in the picture. Note the date, 1913, 13 years later, same street, same everything, but now the question is, can you find the horse? And rather than have you sort of be poisoned by this all presentation, I'll actually show you where the 1900 car is. It's right there. And in 1913, that's the lone single horse. The point is, things can change quickly. And we've seen that even in our lifetime because it accelerates. And this is turn of the century. Peter Diamandis, who is, in my book, one of the geniuses of our age in terms of being able to understand what motivates, to be able to figure out how to put together exciting projects, certainly is. And one of his views of the world is that of all of us, 99.99, you name it, how many nines you want to put in, have no idea what's about to confront us. And sometimes these things happen in orderly fashion, sometimes they're cataclysmic disruptors. To give you an idea quickly, in 1985 or so, in the 1980s, McKinsey was asked to give AT&T a summation, an example of maybe what the market opportunities for cellular phones were. They came back and said 900,000 phones would be sold in a substantial period of time, 15 years. They were off by 120 factors. And, of course, today, go to any concert. Some of us remember using lighters in concerts, but today this is what you normally get to see. Almost 100% penetration of a technology. Lots of other people had bad predictions. The one I particularly point out is from Olson, who was the CEO of DEC, Digital Equipment Corporation, and He just couldn't figure out why anybody would want a computer in their home. Watson, on the other hand, indicated, I think the worldwide market is maybe 5 computers. And that's the IBM guy. So let's not be too surprised that people don't get this stuff when they're viewing it, don't understand where it's heading, how quickly it's heading. What we're going to do is try to go through some of this exponential thinking that helps us understand these cataclysmic disruptors and how they fit together. 10 years ago, on June 29th, the iPhone was introduced. To many people, this period of 10 years sounds kind of short. But I think at the beginning of this period, we could all remember that there were a lot of our population that was very uncomfortable with computing devices, period. And it took this device, a smartphone, to get individuals who were totally uncomfortable with the concept of using a computer to ultimately, over a short period of time, absorb enough skill set and develop enough skill set to understand computing far more so than they did 10 years earlier. If you look at some of the other things that are part of this, it enabled an enormous amount of other activities. Most people don't get it, but they did more damage as a business to cameras than they did actually to phones. Who the hell carries around a small camera these days? You might carry around a big DSLR if you're a professional photographer, but under most circumstances, this camera is pretty darn good that is available. And of course, it enabled applications like Uber, things that would have been impossible without this kind of a device. And that could extend to Airbnb and lots of other businesses that are current businesses in need of disruption, frankly. You'll see in a little bit that I predict that Uber really doesn't need any employees. It could be a software company, a software-based company that has no need for any human beings involved in the business. As a car owner, all you have to do is sign up and start participating and draw the rules and regulations of how you want to participate in this kind of a activity. This is the point I'm making, that Kodak invented the digital camera. This is what it looked like. They thought it was impractical, too expensive. Who would ever carry some monstrosity like this around? And they thought that the pixels of 10,000 pixels was just not adequate. This is the problem of taking a device that's a mechanical device, a camera, and turning it into a digital device, because Moore's law starts taking effect. The greatest shortcoming of the human race is our inability to understand the exponential function. Exponential thinking is hard. And I'll give you an example. If you go from the front of this auditorium to the back of the auditorium, you'll take about 30 steps. Linear, from here to there, that's it. That's the end of the story. If you made those steps exponential, 25 times around the earth. Understood by very few people intuitively. It always feels more appropriate in your mind to deal with things on a linear basis. Second half of the chessboard. Phenomenal concept in my book. I love this idea. Many of you have probably heard the story about somewhere in ancient India or on the European continent, someone invents the game of chess. Some monarch, some person of power likes the game so much they offer to pay whatever the inventor would like. And the inventor, perhaps very wisely, said, "Oh, I don't need much, just do the following. There's 64 squares on my chessboard. Why don't you give me a grain of rice in the first square and then double it each time till the 64th square." And without going into too much detail here, you'll see that by the time you get to the 64th square, you've got something a lot bigger than Mount Everest full of rice. And that is, again, exponential thinking. The past is a foreign country. They do things differently there. What a concept. It's just that sometimes we get stuck in that past and refuse to see the current, let alone the exponential future. Alan Kay, one of the best quotes I ever heard from him, the best way to predict the future is to invent it. The future is already here, it's just not very evenly distributed, kind of reflecting back on my comments that we've got to find a way to distribute technology in an even way so that everyone has access to it, because it leads to strife, war, all kinds of calamities. And the future is, in fact, exponential. Once it turns digital, Moore's law takes effect. This is a device called the ASCII Red supercomputer. In its era, 1997, it was priced at $55 million and finally was able to do 1.3 teraflops worth of an operation. Here's a PS3 released in 2006. It's kind of got it beat. PS4, even better, priced better. Up to 12 teraflops has just been announced. They don't think 12 teraflops is enough to call it a PS5. Not enough of a jump in technology. Anybody have experience putting one of these together? Kids love it. Price $5, 191 megaflops. Anybody remember Cray computers? For a cup of Starbucks coffee equivalent, you can have 2.5 of them. Sizing, here's one in a dimple of a golf ball. $75, 75 cents, and a real serious computing device. This is the first computer that did a petaflop. From 2007 to 2009, it was King of the Hill, an IBM project, Roadrunner. And it was decommissioned in 2012 because, of course, time had come by. And an AMD has unveiled recently Project 47, 1 petaflops of computing in 1 rack instead of that nice little room full of devices. Most of us don't get to see this anymore. We see our smartphone and that's about it. And even that has gone through incredible change. This is revolutionary. India is getting 4G everywhere, available to all of its citizens, and we are about to get 5G, and 5G is immensely faster than 4. Up to 300 megabits was 4G, and 5G is going to be 100 times faster. So it's not just a doubling of technology. We're going to need this for the new versions of the internet that are going to have to be introduced. These are some of the disruptive technologies all conspiring at one time to make a huge difference. I'm not going to have time today to go through them all, but you'll see Internet of Things and the sensors, how they've proliferated. Artificial intelligence and machine learning and deep learning, how robotics is changing the world. Solar photovoltaic, in other words, solar panels, energy storage, autonomous vehicles, 3D printing, now in color, 3D visualization, virtual reality, mobile, internet and the cloud, meaning that AWS, Azure, all of the things that can immediately give you access to incredible computing power. Big data, you can alter elections with big data. Drones, unmanned vehicles are all going to make significant and impressive changes in behavior, in society, and in the way that people do or don't work. Which will lead to some other things. Certainly, we have the topic of drones. I didn't realize that there was going to be a presentation. Maybe some of you saw it on spacecrafts and satellites and nanosatellites. We'll go through just a touch of this. E-money, which is blockchain and Bitcoin. The idea of universal basic income, we'll cover that, and there's a panel discussion about it tomorrow. And you can go down to maybe some of the medical therapeutical issues related to stem cells, organ printing, CRISPR, all digital approaches to life and humans. You've got probably in 17 there, one of the things that I worry about the most when I hear politicians dealing with $13 billion aircraft carriers and $2 billion bombers, none of that counts anymore. For less than $100 million, a fraction of one jet, a trivial fraction of a aircraft carrier, you can be a world-dominating threat. For less than $100 million, you can play cyber warfare with the best. And the price is going down. So we worry about North Korea getting a nuclear weapon. It's not even worth worrying about. What we need to worry about is the tools off the dark web that are easily available for a price that could turn any country into someone who could turn our electricity off for months at a time. Not that there would be a second. And point number 18 is that in the disruptive technologies that we're finding right now, one of the things that we're discovering is that it's only important to dominate and to have access to capital. It is not important to make money. You will find that there are companies like Amazon, Tesla, as an example, who have no primary intention of making money. It's a secondary or tertiary reason to exist or have a business. The main function for the business is to innovate and to make dramatic disruptions universally available. I remember watching Bezos and a analyst on stage, kind of like this, being interviewed. I was in the audience, and the question from the analyst was, at the time, and this was right when AWS was being introduced, the Amazon Web Services, which has turned into a huge deal for Amazon, of course. But at the time, it was a real money loser in an area that most people, analysts in particular, couldn't understand why Amazon would get into. They were supposed to be in the retail business. Why this? And the question was beautiful. The question to Bezos was, how much money are you willing to spend on this AWS project? Bezos, in the most beautiful way, turned to his CFO, who was sitting next to him, and said, how much we got? And that is the difference, being able to take everything and bet it on something like AWS. Mark Andreessen's got this quote, software is eating the world. In fact, Bitcoin is in the middle of this. Blockchain is in the middle of this. It is quite likely, and I certainly believe this doesn't mean that it's real, just means I believe it, that in the not too distant future, 10 to 15 years from now, every sick code will be dominated by an autonomous organization that has 0 employees. All it will be is software performing a service. There will be people who will share by contributing open source code, technology, know-how as contractors to the business, but the business will not have any human activity. It'll simply be there to make life easier for all of us. And in return, the expectation will be is that the service will be provided at the most appropriate, lowest cost possible. And Bitcoin blockchain will be at the center of this disruption. This is the exponential growth of computing for the last 110 years. It's held true, and will continue to hold true. And I think that understanding this and digital devices makes you want to really step back and prepare for what is the next revolution. If you read the book, and I think Christensen was mentioned earlier today, The Innovator's Dilemma, you'll find that there are a pattern that all new technologies go through, including some skepticism. You can probably draw a parallel to the blockchain and Bitcoin very easily. You want to know more, read the book, and please know that you'll be very well served by it. This is a fascinating chart which shows the power of computing and where we are today, about where a mouse brain is replicatable in the computing power that we can put on the table. The important thing and the interesting thing is that in not too many years, we will have the ability to create a computer that'll have one human's brain power worth of power. And that's like in 20, 30 years. I think that's actually a very short version of that estimate and pessimistic version of that estimate. By the time we get to 2100 or so, the computing devices, the boards that we'll be producing, will have the brain power or the computing capacity of all of Earth's 7 billion human beings available on a single chip. Once a technology becomes digitized and moves into this exponential curve, there's the 7 Ds. Occasionally it was referred to in the past as the 6 Ds. A 7th D has been added. Once you get digitized, then you go through a process in which the commodity almost becomes free, and ultimately it becomes democratized. Everybody has access to it. It is nearly cheap, nearly free, and if it's done in a particular form or fashion as distributed, it has the added advantage of not requiring any permissions. Some of you may know Sean Parker or know of him. He was the guy behind Napster. Napster was a single centralized offering of music stealing. Any politician that wanted to get a photo opportunity could walk up to the server, yank the plug, end of Napster. Tor replaced it, a decentralized solution, and of course we all know that unstoppable. The 7th D is that decentralization. One example, and I could give you 50, but one is that Uber is not the final entity. It has been enabled, it's a disruptor. It has been given all kinds of advantages over the traditional taxi cabs and transportation, but it's not yet fully decentralized. I said earlier, people who have automobiles can donate them or just driving capability. And this doesn't include even the following step. Once you, of course, decentralize, you can also figure out that most of these cars who are contributed don't need drivers. They'll be automatically self-driven vehicles. Example here is of a printing press. You want to read a book. You had to grow some trees. You had to cut them down. You had to make pulp out of them. You have to create paper. You had to worry about all of the contamination. You put it in a printing press, set the type, blah, blah, blah. Well, now all you have to do, it's virtually free. The content doesn't require any trees to be cut down. You don't have to end up with a big printing press and all of that. It is basically ability to bring you that content free of charge. How many of you guys have heard of graphene? Anybody? Oh, what an audience. I love this. Well, I guess I'll just shorten up what my comments would be on this and just simply say, graphene, if the movie with Dustin Hoffman called The Graduate was being made today and the question was what business to go into, the answer would not be plastic. Trust me, it would be graphene. And it has unbelievable powers in 100 different areas, including the fact that graphene turned into roofing tiles, supplementing solar, can turn rain into electric power. How many people are aware of CRISPR? Again, an audience with a few more well-read people than most. Well, CRISPR is a hacking tool, a software tool to dissect your genome and make some strategic changes, like do you want to run faster than Bolt or slower than Bolt? If you want to run faster, no problem. Here's the code. Just hack the genome, put it back in, and pretty much your custom kid comes out with those hereditary concepts passed on to future generations. It's not a comfortable concept to some, but frankly, it's going to get done, and it's been done, and it's being done, and it'll be done in China. It'll be done in all kinds of places, so get used to it. Those with access to the presentation, you'll see that it's not a really impossible job. It's actually being done today. is being used in treating diseases, changing the susceptibility of somebody be a diabetic, somebody being susceptible to heart disease. All of these things are on an experimental basis already being done now. In 2017, CRISPR has made some incredible advances. Even in the cancer area, the last point there, number 4, CRISPR has successfully targeted the command center of cancer, called the hybrid fusion, which leads to abnormal human tumor growth. A cut and paste method allowed the creation of cancer annihilating gene that shrinks tumors in mice carrying human prostate and liver cancer cells. This is enormously important in the field of medicine, and it's available now. And I think there are 6 companies that you can invest in. About 5 of them are private, 1 is public, and gives you full access to this information. Continued on, CRISPR is a magical technology. Dr. Atala, who I sat on as chair of his regenerative medicine board in Wake Forest, has created kidneys, has created all kinds of human tissue that has been inserted and put into humans. One of the most incredible sights is he's got an inkjet printer set up with stem cells. He'll print a mouse heart layer by layer. At the conclusion of the printing, the house heart will beat. It's also been displayed at the Chicago Museum of Science and Industry. Cost of DNA sequencing. We've got this dramatic drop from 1999 where it cost almost $3 billion to do. Now we're under 1,000 and dropping. In fact, I just read that the Chinese are offering it for a much lower cost and a speedier return. You can get on the internet, a couple of companies that'll, for $995, give you a full readout of exactly what's wrong with you and how fast you're going to die. This is a cute little byproduct of that genome activity. There's an artist in New York, Heather Dewey Hagborg, who is interested in DNA, and she is picking up cigarette butts on New York streets, extracting the DNA and creating the facial artwork of all of the candidates. Now they can give this to the police and you could get your citation for dropping cigarette butts and littering. AI is the new electricity. This audience, probably you're all very familiar. If it isn't graphene, AI is certainly on the forefront of the kind of deep technology that will drive autonomous organizations. AI is going to have to be there on the blockchain, not just a programming language, but a company that learns to compete, a company that can become a living organism based on its AI components. I found one of the things on this topic so fascinating, and that is that we can now have computers that demonstrably 100% of the time beat human poker players. And the most incredible feedback from that is that the poker players went into deep depression. They refused to show up for additional games because they knew it was worthless to show up because they'd lose every single time. And of course, other games have also been conquered. Text.io, anybody know this company? It's kind of cute. Write your resume. It will make sure your resume is sellable by changing the words that aren't making you as sellable into more sellable, paraphrased capabilities. Sensors. This may be the last thing that I'll cover, but you got incredible 1,000x growth in sensors from not too long ago. Everybody's installing sensors in their house. Sometimes they don't even know it, whether it's controlling your lights, your air conditioning, your power, certainly everything that can be done by Alexa and all of the other home instruments, including listen in on everything that you've ever said and done. Here's the LG refrigerator, fully capable of ordering whenever some milk is at a low level, sensing it, providing you with delivery. Amazon is owned by Jeff Bezos, who owns the Washington Post and has a $600 million deal with the CIA. You can just wonder why. Do you still want one? I still do. It's worth it. I love the conversations. It's evolving into Echo Show, which has just recently been introduced. It'll continue, and we'll use up probably all of the Amazon Fire devices that are in the back office, in the warehouse, and I'm sure that'll have fabulous success. Nano satellites. I know some of you probably saw the presentation on rocketry and satellites, and I saw it, but I didn't know it was going to be given here. But these things are getting truly ridiculously small. In fact, India just sent up some kid's satellite that he put together by himself. The fascinating things is that the Indian record, they put 104 satellites into orbit in one goal, about a $25 million operation to do it. It's getting lower and lower in terms of cost. In fact, one day you'll be able to put up these little tiny satellites that'll go up. If you don't like your neighbor and you want to block the sun off his tomato plants, you can get these satellites to swarm and exactly on their tomato plant, stop the light from focusing on their garden. Anyway, drones being yet another huge disruptor, especially when you consider what Amazon is thinking of doing it. They are intending to, at 45,000 feet, have warehouses full of your to-be-ordered material, sending drones down who will fall to the earth and then slowly descend after the 90% of the fall and deposit it at your doorstep. And there is even a patent that they have now filed to actually create a clothing factory floating in the sky, so that once you measure your sizes and want to order your clothing, it'll be manufactured up in the air above your house and dropped almost immediately. So we are in the middle of incredible disruptions. And understanding all of them and their interrelationship, especially how blockchain facilitates it, is a wonderful, fascinating field. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Hang on just a minute.
Ladies and gentlemen, wasn't that incredible? Tell you what, I wish we could go like 3 more hours, don't you? Be great. Flip, how do we get in touch with you? What's the best way if we say, hey, I want to learn more about you, what you're doing, all this? What's the best way? Come here, tell us about that.
The best way is you can get me at flip@flurry.
Spell that, please.
FLUR.EE. With my hats off to Estonia for the EE. I love their technology and their voting and
Their passport, e-passport.
yeah, they're a country to be emulated. And I understand that we could all claim that they're a small country with a little population, a little easier to start off with that, but frankly, scaling that shouldn't be too hard.
All right, another round of applause.